about not only how codes are written, but how they can be effective for enforcement for the staff that's there, can meet the needs of what the council expects, and also is easy to understand for the people who might be wanting to put in a swimming pool or solar panel when they're sitting at their computer late at night. Those codes are so important. So the other part of what I'm doing, roughly about 50% of what I'm doing, is doing comprehensive plans and area plans for clients as well. And I've been fortunate working with CMT. They brought a lot of those very interesting things to me. And so I've really enjoyed being able to offer those services as well, from comprehensive plan updates to land use plans that I've done for municipalities like Hamel, Illinois. In the past, I also have worked with Columbia, Illinois, and with Highland in the St. Louis area. So if you're looking for, I'll call myself a seasoned planner, and have almost 20 years of experience in the field. And if you're looking for someone who has sat in your chair and wrestled with the challenges of taking care of what I call the gophers that pop up, things that need to be taken right away, and still trying to do long range planning and respond to council members who are looking to update their zoning codes because they have a food truck that wants to come to town and you don't have time to write the ordinance. I have your exact experience and would love to talk with you about how I might be able to help you. So keep CMT in mind, keep me in mind. A lot of you know me from my time with the St. Louis Metro section over the years. And look forward to hearing from you. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Scott. And yeah, so CMT, great firm. So please reach out to Scott Hansen if you like. And the next we have is Amy with Rdg to give a short, brief talk on their planning activities. Amy?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Amy Hossie with Rdg Planning and Design. I see a few familiar faces and names up here, so it's great to see you. We are an architecture, landscape architecture, and planning firm. I am based in our Omaha office. We also have offices in Des Moines and St. Louis and Denver now, and we have a pretty distributed workforce around the country too, so everywhere from New York to Florida and in a lot of different locations too. We do, one of the things I've been with Rdg for 21 years now, and I do a pretty wide range of planning work, which is probably what I've always loved about Rdg and the work we get to do, is that we have a lot of variety and a lot of expertise in multiple different areas. So a lot of my work over my career has been in comprehensive community planning. So I've had the chance to work with Camdenton and Maryville and Excelsior Springs there in Missouri, but I've also done comprehensive planning work everywhere from Bismarck, North Dakota to Kermit, Texas. So if anybody can tell me where Kermit is, that's our geography quiz for the day. And so lots of variety of experiences. Have actually had the opportunity, Maryville being one of them, to have worked with a number of university cities. And so that's been a lot of fun over my career. Also do a lot of community housing market studies. So one of the things that we emphasize in our market studies is it's not just number crunching and data collection, but it combines with strategy. So how do you use the numbers and the data that we're giving you related to the market, and how do you move forward to address the issues that you have? And again, that's something have done all over the Midwest, have completed hundreds of studies from a 12-county region. I'm actually, to be all in full disclosure, I'm currently working on my presentation to upload for the Missouri ABA conference, which will be on regional approaches to housing studies. So I've had the chance to work with a 4-county area around the Lake of the Ozarks, They're in Missouri, but I've also in Taney County, but also 11 county region in Indiana. So have worked with some bigger regions down to really small communities, and talking about strategies that they need to addressing to. We're just completing the Affordable Housing Action Plan for the city of Lincoln here in Nebraska too. So, which actually has a really interesting twist to it, because here in this summer, our state legislature passed a missing middle housing ordinance. So we are quickly incorporating that aspect into the plan. So it's bringing around some great dialogue around how housing variety and missing middle housing. We also do quite a bit of corridor and neighborhood redevelopment work. Just finished up a corridor plan down in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and do that again all over the area. Actually, we're working in the St. Louis area with Muscuda over on the Illinois side, currently having the chance to work on that project. That's my partner, Marty Schukertz. We also do a lot of bike and pedestrian planning, so multimodal planning too. That's one of the great passions of my partner, Marty Schukertz. So he does those again all over the Midwest. Have done a number of those in especially in Kansas and the Wichita area recently, but bring a lot of that aspect to our work on Muscuda, but also on the MLK Boulevard project we worked on in the St. Louis area too. We also do quite a bit of downtown redevelopment work. And again, I have a partner, Corey Scott, who that's kind of his specialty, although I do a number of the downtown redevelopment projects here in Nebraska with some of our smaller communities. So we get a full range of kind of community size from that, from work with Grand Forks, North Dakota, to Little Brownville, Nebraska, which has about 200 people. But if you don't know Brownville, it's actually kind of a little cultural and arts destination on the Missouri River. We also specialize in, I think I mentioned neighborhood planning, the corridor planning, downtown districts, and housing studies. So pretty wide variety. One of the things and one of our growing areas also that we're expanding into more and more is in historic preservation planning. So we have a historic preservation architect on our team, and one of her great passions is within that area, and so she can help you if you are looking to want to become a CLG or establishing a historic preservation plan. So we're actually going to be working with Jackson in Missouri there, starting that up. So a pretty wide variety with a lot of expertise, and we're also lucky because we have a lot of that architecture. We have the architecture, the landscape architecture, so we team a lot of times with our landscape architects in our office. We also have an art studio based in our Des Moines office, so which is really exciting because that gets into some of the public art. They do a lot of public artwork, and how do you want to tell your story as your community and express that through the public art that can come alive in your streetscape and so forth. So pretty wide variety. Looking forward, I actually probably won't make it to Springfield for the conference, but happy to answer any questions anybody has, and looking forward to answering any questions you have from our session in Springfield.
Well, thank you very much, Amy. That was wonderful. If anyone has additional questions, please reach out to Amy. And with that note, you mentioned the Missouri State Planning Conference. So that's coming up actually next week, either in person or they're offering on-demand virtual sessions starting on, I believe that's the Wednesday, the 7th. So either join in person or at both for a reduced rate, or join on-demand virtual session. Before we get into Bob Lewis's presentation, two other items to note. The section has worked hard to bring you a new updated strategic plan. The strategic plan will cover the next 5 years, 2020 through 2025. And we thank actually not only our section members, which I'm going to share who those wonderful people are. Let's see who our current board members are, but also just to highlight Todd Streilers and Susan, geez, I'm blanking right now. I'm sorry, Susan Herrera, yeah, I'm sorry, Herrera, thank you. They worked diligently on crafting this plan, and it'll be on the section's website the next few days or so. So please take a look at that. But also we always thank our section members that we have here today, the ones that are voted in. Also, I'd just like to note, like Michael Zeke, who has been on the board for a number of years. He's our professional development officer who works to help get the CM credits, including the ethics one going. So we thank all the work of our members. With that said, if Bob Lewis, we'll give you just a moment, but if you're ready, we are going to start on your presentation as soon as I share the screen. Share this.
All right, so I've got the power now, huh, Jonathan? All right.
One moment.
All righty. Or maybe I will. Nobody gives planners enough power. That's.
All right, try it now, Bob, to share.
Let's see if that works, and I can pick up. All right, is that visible?
Perfect.
That's working? All righty. We'll get rid of all your faces so that I don't have to look at mine either. Well, thanks for having me. I think we'll have a little fun today. I sort of based my thoughts and concerns on this topic on my own understanding and following of the AICP ethics, which, by the way, do not, if you haven't taken the AICP exam, don't read the ethics ahead of time, because then you're going to say, I don't want to take that exam and have to obey all these rules. There's a lot of them. But and I have to first say that if Scott Hampson, who described himself as a seasoned planner, if he's a seasoned planner, I wonder what I am. Overcooked or something, I find out maybe. And Amy, thanks for telling me that you're still working on your Missouri APA presentation to upload. I have to do the same thing and finish it by today. This St. Louis section thing kind of got in the way. And who knew that Marty Schukert was a biker? Boy, that's really news to everybody. But let's get underway. First, I got to take a big bite of this gigantic cookie I got. It seems to be the only lunch I got that Don Rowe brought by this morning. Very, very nice of you to bring some peanut butter cookies by, Don. I suspect on the side he's a baker, so you might want to talk to him about learning some of those gimmicks. This must be the good smells we hear have in the neighborhood all the time. Is Don working in his oven? Let me get started though. Back on July 5th, New York Times Sunday section, review section, had a series of 15 opinion articles on the economy we need, part of a series that the Times been doing on the America we need. And being something of an economist, I, of course, sat there on a Sunday afternoon on the back porch, read all 15 pieces, and discovered quickly that it wasn't so much the economist in me that was woked, but the planner that was woked. Most of the insights, the analysis, data, recommendations that came out of this Economy We Need series really are actions or purviews of planners. Now, of course, I'm biased about that. I think planners can pretty much solve everything. But more planners than probably any other single profession in many ways. So we planners should, I hope out of this meeting, we have conversations about how we should not only recognize that we are really good at these things, or should be pursuing the topics I'm going to address here in a few minutes, but that we own that, make the economy we need part of our profession's mission. And that relates directly to, in my mind, principle A1F of the AICP code. By the way, I don't memorize that. I do look that up. I wouldn't know if it was A1F unless I looked it up, but it's A1F. We'll talk about that toward the end of the presentation here. But when you start reading a lot of the AICP ethics, you're going to say, well, there's a lot of thoughts in this series here that we planners should be paying attention to. So I raised this topic with Jonathan Roper and said, what can I do to get this topic off my chest, my radical planner's thoughts? And he calmed me down. Good for him. That's why he's the president. And then we agreed that this would be a good topic for the September meeting. So let's get underway. The first thing I did was change the name of the title. Once given what I just said about everything, it's really about the planners we need to create the economy we need. In many ways, therefore I've included some images here of some of my favorite old planners back when they were around when I was in graduate school. Jane Jacobs, Paul Davidoff, advocacy planners, really. Planners that got out there and made things happen rather than just simply design cities and so forth. So a lot of change happened in the 60s with regard to our profession, and a lot of that stuck with me in how to be a planner. It can't always be these ways. You wear yourself out and not always the opportunities. So I changed the topic to what we need to talk about is the planners we need. So let's move on from there. And I'm going to real quick run through the 15 opinion articles. They were technically opinions, different authors in the New York Times thing. The one called Jobs We Need article was really pointed out that the output, one of the key takeaways I took, by the way, if you want all 15, I did print them all down. So if you contact me, I can send you all 15 on PDF. The Jobs We Need article points out that the output of the national economy here in the United States has almost tripled since 1980, over the last 40 years, tripled. But the wealthy, this shouldn't be news to too many, the wealthy have hoarded most of the fruits of that labor. So in fact, the rich have been getting richer, and that's a challenge I think we're hearing in the political discussions that are going on now. Y'all can tune into the debate tonight, right? The article, American Workers Deserve to Live with Dignity, reports that basically too many Americans do not possess even the basic freedoms, believe it or not, to earn a living of dignity and security. You get thoughts like that start to get your blood boiling. The article on are you willing to give up your privilege? Mind you, this is the New York Times, probably who dominates the readers of the New York Times. The article on privilege asks if the beneficiaries of a system that perpetuates inequality, are they willing to give up something? I think that's a relevant question. Even in today's news out of the New York Times, or this week's news out of the New York Times, regarding who pays taxes. On employer-based healthcare, meet massive unemployment. This is one of those topics that says if we're going to have great employer-based healthcare, that's marvelous unless you're not employed, or you don't have, or you're not even considered an employee. Too many contract and related kinds of employees or gig economy employees. They're not really employees, so they don't get the benefits out of employer-based healthcare that I think we probably all deserve in some manner. How are we handling that? How much money Americans actually make is an interesting article that says if we talked about that more, if you and I shared what our salaries are, we would probably lead to more equality and fairer distribution of income, because then we would know and we'd be able to negotiate better, and we would probably band together, not unlike what unions have been doing for a long time. They all know what they're making, or even in most of professional sports. It seems like their gigantic salaries are all reported in the papers, but it's pretty well known, and it enables them to negotiate better and compare themselves to those who are probably of similar or dissimilar capabilities. Believe it or not, before the 1980s, profit sharing was a very important way to distribute earned income by private companies. It could have probably been better, but since then, related to that topic I mentioned on the Jobs We Need article, the corporate leaders and stockholders have been hoarding, keeping most of those profits in ways that's not been benefiting the workforce in particular. Let's see, I'm gonna get rid of this. Too many buttons to push here. Banks should face history and pay reparations. Well, the reparations word has really gotten into my head lately. given all the things that have been going on in this astounding year of 2020. But the article basically commends banks in particular for supporting a lot of the demonstrations that are going on about racial injustice. But then it says that they should really walk the walk. And by training and hiring more people of color, paying better wages, and giving better benefits for everybody. So it's like, yeah, you're doing great to support things, but talking the talk, but can you walk the walk? American companies are sick. One of the challenges American companies have been getting and are supported in many ways by federal law and state laws as well is if you're having problems, get yourself merged or absorbed or bought by another company. In fact, it's probably not good. We're not really supporting enough of how do we heal the sick, increasing the competition within the economy so we have more companies, maybe helping them run their businesses better. There are lots of different ways to do that, but we don't really have sort of national programs on that help to heal, help good companies be run as businesses better than having to merge with somebody else or get bought out. This one blew my mind that the black-white wage gap is as big as it was in 1950. Really? I'm going, what are we talking about here? I thought we'd made some gains. According to those statistics, not. In fact, there's an article in today's Post-Dispatch that sort of reinforces this conclusion. I think, wow, apparently 2019, good year for the economy. That gap didn't really close. We still got a challenge along those times. Women ask themselves, how can I do this one more day? That was an intriguing article. It turns out, well, the women entered the labor force in unprecedented numbers and stayed there, starting in the 1970s as baby boomers began graduating high school and college. In fact, they still have, have had for a while, a higher labor participation rate than men do, yet they still perform most of the homemaker and caregiver responsibilities. So, when do we give a break to the women? When more than their fair share of the overall work of supporting our society. Future of work isn't what we think it is. Yeah, we think in terms of technology, in manufacturing, outside of manufacturing, and so forth. But what's been revealed, particularly with this whole pandemic issue, is that the workers we need and most of the future workers are really going to be, as they say, they're not going to be wearing boots and hard hats. They're going to be wearing sneakers and scrubs. Think essential workers. Who are those essential workers? And we're going to need a lot of them, and they're primarily, again, in the service industry to serve us all, whereas we move technology and all that into other sectors much more thoroughly and strongly. 40% of all wealth in America stems from inheritances. I got a little when my dad passed away. But the point of this article was that 40% of why many people are well off has nothing to do with their own abilities. And the numbers can be big. It doesn't mean there's 40% of us that have big wealth by any means, but a lot of the wealth is created not so much by our own abilities as by just getting lucky. So the article there is saying, let's tax that and spread that out a little bit better. Something we haven't been very good at as a nation, at least since about the 1950s. To no one's surprise, some Americans are more equal than others. Wealth seems to beget political influence, as we all know, well beyond the ballot box. And is that right for an all men or, well, all people are created equal kind of a nation that we claim to be? And some of these shouldn't be news to all of us. It's kind of putting it all together in one place. And then bring on the 28th Amendment. Well, hopefully you all know that there aren't 28 amendments to the United States Constitution. 7, at least not a 28th yet. This is the constitutional amendment idea that's been kicking around. I don't know how strongly, but it contained, would end the escalating influence of big money that dominates our elections. An interesting thought that comes out of that article is that the Constitution really contains no affirmative right to vote. it's got a lot of words and exhortations on how not to prevent people from voting, but it's really not, doesn't come right out and say everybody should get out there and vote. That's our right. Exercise it, by the way. You all better be registered. You better be voting, assuming you're all over, how old do you have to be? 18 these days, I guess, in the upcoming. And then finally, the last of the 15 articles is kind of a summary prepared by the editors of the Times board themselves. And that's what I'm going to dwell on here for a few minutes. America needs repairs. And so this is where the Times editors took the other 14 articles and pulled out some interesting recommendations, recommended action, things we should be doing. And as I read, that's when I read through those, and I thought, wow, these are the kinds of things planners probably should be involved with. Leading the way depends, but certainly involved with and helping make our communities great. So I wanted to walk through those real quick and give you a sense of where they're going. The Times wrote those. By the way, if you read all the articles, the other 14, you're going to say, I got to write these things down because there's all kinds of good ideas in there. I didn't do that. I'm not that crazy. That would sound like billable work to me, or writing a book. But the Times did a nice job of kind of capturing most of the kind of cool ideas, at least for the radical planner that occasionally pops into my head here. So they've broken into 4 main topics: a fair chance for children, workers' compensation, stronger safety net. Hope you know what a safety net is in the economic sense. Things like Social Security or unemployment benefits, et cetera, are safety net. Things go bad, at least there's some support in the economy somewhere to help out. And then a couple of recommendations on the will of the people, which, does that sound like economics? I don't know, but it certainly sounds like what planners should be leading. So let me walk through these recommendations. I think there's a grand total of 16 in the 15 or 16. Cool idea, create a federal savings account. Put dollars in there every time you're born, somebody's born. So on your 0th birthday, your first real birthday, you get $1,000 in some kind of savings account, and let it paid for by the government, which is us taxpayers, those of us who pay taxes, that is, and then allow it to grow. Add to it, allow families and friends to add to it. You can do it yourself, and grow with compound interest. And so I did some quick numbers. Just say these days a savings account pays less than 1%. So we're probably talking about hopefully a different kind of savings account, but. And if you added $500 a year to age 21, at that 1% rate, starting with 1,000, you'd have $13,000 by the age of 21. In likelihood, if you had one of these things, assuming under these thoughts that you don't allow access till adulthood, you could have a pretty good nest egg for going to college, buying that house, et cetera, whatever it takes to take advantage of some wealth. By the way, all the red stuff in here, all these red letters, words that I've got on these recommendations are directly from the Times article. The gray stuff are my ideas. They're contained in there, but they're my words and the gray words. So a second thought under fair chance for children is to eliminate single-family zoning. Interesting thought to be in this topic, as Minneapolis it did. And my thought, that's as we've talked about, I think in the planning profession, we do a lot more of that. Big step toward more housing. Creation and affordability, even more efficient use of land and of the infrastructure that supports that land. So it's a fascinating experiment going on right now to create more opportunities for affordable housing in many ways by reducing the pressures on the land, which we've kind of artificially kept out, particularly people of too few means, and that usually means too many people of color. So the great talk, great discussion that I don't know if we've done that here in the in St. Louis yet to talk about it, but we probably should. Let's think about the implications thereof. Provide universal pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds. One of the amazing things about this thought is that everybody believes in it. It has a huge impact on children's lives. It also has a huge impact on families, but parents of such kids generally can't afford private daycare. Yeah, they will be able to. Many of them, however, are in entry-level new jobs out of college, graduate school don't really have the income. It's hard to support kids anyway, let alone at your early career salary levels. So that's why we created public schools in many ways. But those don't start really till kindergarten. And so should we have a program nationally, ideally, that would start a year earlier, in effect, and really get kids rolling. Having right now 3 granddaughters, and one of them's 4. It's like, and she, right now it's because of the pandemic, where she's not really going to any kind of pre-kindergarten or daycare. But how valuable is that for their interests, for their growth, and for easing some pressure on the families, particularly the women who tend to be the primary caregivers. And we're seeing a lot of that even with the older kids. It seems like it's always the women working the computers at home at the non-school schooling. Spend more education on or spend more on the education of low-income children related. It's complicated. I think in the real world, that spending is really the answer for education for everybody. But it's certainly a big part of the answer. Resources are not well distributed to assure that particularly younger kids get a better exposure to socialization and early ideas on reading and quantitative analysis and so forth. And I love this one, get rid of lead water pipes, all of them, period. Those words come right out of there. Tell me, I'll challenge you, tell me that isn't a good idea. It's sort of like, why didn't we learn this lesson earlier and spend some of our infrastructure money on that? So we'll switch topics to the workers' compensation category. Interesting thought that the Federal Reserve should minimize black unemployment. Now, I hope you know that the Fed's main responsibility is to maintain a low inflation and a low unemployment rate in the United States economy by managing money supply. Conflicts sometimes, big news lately that they're keeping the what they do with the interest rate, money supply, and the effect on the interest rate low for the next 3 years. Says something about what they think about the future economy, I think, but that's another story. But they have a target unemployment rate for the nation's labor force. This thought suggests that they target policies more toward those disadvantaged groups in particular, not an overall average. In theory, the way things have been going, if you lowered the black unemployment rate substantially, the white unemployment rate would be really, really low. More ideally, we're more equal, but that right now, if to look at an overall average is not necessarily the right answer. Increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Still probably not enough, but again, that's the radical planner in me. But the federal minimum rate still hangs in there at 7.25. Like, really? I think that's what I made when I was in college or something, but working the odd jobs. 7.25 is roughly $15,000 a year for if you're working full time at that. We all kind of figure that doesn't much. But $15 an hour, a little more than double that, can be roughly the equivalent of $30,000 a year for a full-time wage or salary. So it's a big difference. How many people does it affect? Actually, not that many. How many dollars is that? In the scale of the United States economy, not that much, but it really, really would help and give people dollars to spend as they see them, which is a freedom that we all enjoy here in the United States, or try to. Likewise, doubling the earned income tax credit. There's certainly no reason in my mind why we couldn't raise taxes on the rich or adjust tax codes on the rich to support this sort of thing. It's not that big a deal for the national economy or our national treasury, but it certainly is a big deal for the large number, but it's a relatively small part of the population that could benefit from it. Require employers to pay for family and medical leave. Again, that gets back a little bit to the health insurance. If you've got employer-based health insurance, you may be doing fine until you get fired or get laid off in some manner, or considered not an employee. So related to all that is not only health care, but for family and medical leave. Yet we do some of that with maternity leave, paternity leave to some degree. Usually, however, that's unpaid. You just get a job when you get, your job is secure when you come back a few months later. And, in my mind, while we're at it, let's make all those contract and gig employees, maybe actual employees, so they can benefit from all that as well. And then extend these labor protections. It's weird why we have never done this to domestic workers, people who are working in your home and are basically employed by you, if you can afford that. They're not covered well, and I've never quite really understood that in my career. Why when wasn't this a good idea? So don't tell me it isn't. Stronger safety net category, provide housing vouchers to all eligible families. Open up the market. Now, I'm not an expert on how the housing vouchers really work and all that, enough probably to be dangerous. But in theory, it gives people, families, households more flexibility in the marketplace to spend what they qualify for in vouchers to rent properties wherever they want. So it opens up the market. But in my mind, especially if you're going to move this into a support for owner occupancy, I would say we also need to combine this with a lot of assistance for, how do you manage a house? It's one thing to rent property and the landlord basically takes care of the property and the equipment thereof. When you own a house, you got to sort of know how to do that yourself, either fix it or who to call. So I always think of this topic. I didn't have to get a license or some training to buy a house, nor did I have to get a license or training to raise children. Now, I had to get a license to get married, kind of weird, but didn't teach me how to take care of kids. So a lot of we could use some more of that sort of thing. We need to reward cities that allow more housing construction. So find me an article that says we have too much housing in America. Right now, it's not the case. We may have too much housing in some ways in the metropolitan St. Louis area, not a growing place. We've got a lot of vacant housing, underutilized, re-improved housing in St. Louis, which has an effect on values and rents because it basically compresses those kinds of things in ways that aren't true in more robust areas. But all in all, we don't have enough housing. And so can we find a way to maybe even reward communities that will provide more housing? Basically, as we all know as planners, land use, housing construction are managed at the very local level with land use planning, zoning, and other related regulations. Now, on the other side, we have like 5 times as much retail space as we have. So, why does this imbalance exist? We want retail taxes and not people. Expand the program to end homelessness among veterans to everybody. I'm not all that expert on this, but the article pointed out that there is a pretty good program to working with the homeless among military veterans. Well, why can't we expand that out to the other issues as well? We got to do better. It's not like you can look out there and say, well, that's a pretty good program, and then still all these homeless are out there. Again, they're not always by choice. Some of them are, but many of them are, they've come under some heavy family, financial, and even mental pressures. Just can't get there from here. And I think, veterans certainly deserve it because they've served nobly for an American cause, but in my mind, so is everybody else, including us planners. It's not like we're not serving the public or serving America. Restore federal funding for public health agencies. Before March of this year, I might have said, what? But after that, you think, wait, why don't we have all the resources we need at the from federal down to the local county levels? It's just astounding what we haven't been doing. But then you start looking at articles that point out that we really have been cutting these things over time. Government is the problem, or let's cut taxes. Where do we cut? And if things are fine, everybody's reasonably healthy, we're okay. But I think as a nation, as government, we need to be preparing for these occasional black swans. It's going to happen. Things like this do happen. We see tornadoes, we see hurricanes, we see wildfires. We're going to see the occasional pandemic, and we have, even in this century. I've seen those kinds of things. They haven't gotten as bad as this one, but still that. Now that said, remember that I'm employed by the College for Public Health and Social Justice at SLU, so this is a plug for public health. Now, finally, a couple more. Make it easier for Americans to vote. Just astounded back with the primaries of the summer. One polling place in all of Louisville. Did I get that right? I mean, what the hell? Why are we slowing down the mail service? So what are we afraid of, or what are they afraid of? Who are they are? And it should be a piece of cake to vote. And I think most places, most counties who are usually in charge of these things do an astoundingly good job. I've always been impressed with the elections officials here in the city of St. Louis, where I live. It seems to come off without a hitch. Now that said, we're pretty much a one-party town, but they always find Republicans to sit there at the polling places. They're really nice downtown when I have to deal with the election officials for absentee voting and such. So it can be done. And I think that a lot of credit needs to go to elections officials who really are devoted to nonpartisanship and making sure everybody gets a full chance. But again, this is my radical planner hat on here. And then provide funding for congressional candidates. I think this topic's been around since maybe as far back as Abe Lincoln, maybe further. In theory, it broadens that pool of candidates. More people can afford to run for office. And we need to expand that pool to find people that really want and will do the job right. It also enables our representatives to represent and not fundraise. I'm always shocked when I read, a United States congressman or a state representative spends, a day or two a week on average on the phone raising money or going to fundraising events and so forth. Really, wouldn't it be better to do the same things at some kind of events and actually talking to people who can't afford to contribute to your treasury and so forth? But again, who's going to make those decisions? So careful and don't hold your breath. So let me conclude by talking about this A1F component of the AICP ethics and kind of where I got my start here. There are 5 broad areas of ethics in the AICP code. By the way, if you're not an AICP member, you're still a planner and you should behave. Although we just can't turn you in if you do it bad. So there are 5. The first one, and I urge you to get online and look through them. The first one is the broad categories, principles to which we aspire. And if you've taken, and you have, if you're an AICPer, you've taken the ethics courses, every couple of years we got to do them. You're aware of these kinds of words now. And the first component in that principle or that category of principles is that what's our overall responsibility to the public, and there are a number of overall responsibilities to the public. And I focused in this case on letter F, which would be the 6th one listed. And important to read it through a little bit. We shall, as planners, particularly certified planners, but planners in general, in my mind, we shall seek social justice. Whoa, dude. I thought I was like an urban designer or a transportation planner. No, we're going to seek social justice by working to expand choice and opportunity for all persons, recognizing a special responsibility to plan for the needs of the disadvantaged and to promote racial economic integration and all that implies. I mean, these are powerful words to me as a professional. I hope they are to you. And then therefore we shall urge the alteration of policies, institutions, and decisions that oppose those kinds of needs. So, and we can see those all the time. We see them in our day-to-day work in zoning codes and et cetera. We see it certainly in issues related to the Supreme Court of the United States. So we have a responsibility to make sure that people are getting a fair shake. And once I read all of those articles, the opinion pieces in the New York Times, I said, wow, this isn't just about the economy, although the economy is in a crucial context in which we all live. We do sell our wares. We use the resources we gain from selling our goods and services, particularly us planners, we're more service oriented. So it is about the economy, also about choice within that economy. What kinds of, if I'm making $1, do I have the choice in where I spend it? And do I have some left over to really enjoy life, the pursuit of happiness? So we all should be working to making sure that people have the resources or have the opportunity at least to get to those resources and maybe some help to get them actually to those resources. Frankly, there are always going to be people who don't want to be part of that system. We have to work with that, but we are certainly affecting a lot of people in ways that deserve, and I use that broad term very broadly, deserve more support. And we planners are basically ethically bound to do all of that. With that, I'll say that's all, folks, for now, and return it to Jonathan or somebody, and maybe there's a Q&A, or we can go home and I can finish these peanut butter cookies that Don baked for me.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. And thanks for a wonderful presentation and including those ethics components on there as well. Right now, we will open it up for questions or comments to Bob or just the section in general. So once you're ready, you can either, if we have too many, we'll just put your name in the chat, or if we don't have too many, you just holler out your questions. So with that, do we have any questions for Bob at this point?
I'm shocked that Carol Wagner hasn't jumped up and said, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Bob, I got a question for you. One of your slides talked about how we're overprogrammed on retail. And one of the interesting things, especially in our COVID world right now, is I know a lot of local governments are relying heavily on the tax dollars from those retail establishments. And of course, some of us, derive our paychecks from those tax dollars that are raised. How do we how do we balance that? I know, in my hometown, Springfield, Illinois, there's not an arterial or collector street that they haven't zoned commercial and tried to squeeze every penny out of their investments into public infrastructure. But they're way over programmed. I agree on the retail, but Springfield relies heavily on those sales taxes. People are tired of paying property taxes. So what's the balance for planners in today's age in terms of? We also know, of course, a lot of retail is coming through the Amazons of the world. The general rule of thumb is a 20% across the board cut on the amount of future retail space that communities are planning for. So this is a really interesting and important question. I was in your thoughts on it.
Yeah, Scott, it's a great question. And I think the problem isn't so much that we are relying at the local level, relying a little too much on local sales taxes, but that's, I think, less a challenge than we've programmed, I like your word, programmed too much land area for that sort of thing in hopes that there'd be ample retail, which would generate taxes as well. I think the problem is we just don't have the buying power, or it's not in the right places, the right time. So we've drawn red squares and rectangles and corridors on our land use maps, and maybe even zoned them for that. But have we based those kinds of decisions on really what's the likely potential for good and well-paying sales tax, or retailers that would pay sales taxes? So some of it, these days, I would say in the last decade, maybe a little longer, we've actually got better data about that. And we're sharing more of that data, I think, as communities, as states, and understanding how to use that information. I don't know if Paul Hubman's on the Zoom right now, but Paul gave me a terrific presentation to my urban planning class last night. And one of the things he talked about was the Great Streets plan that was done for Manchester Road out in West County, Manchester, Ellisville, and Wildwood, and those like places. And how at the time that they did this is like 10 years ago, they did the market analysis. I wasn't part of the team then. And figured out what's the buying power. What can that corridor and those communities support for retail? And redrew the land use map. Now, it hasn't gone up very far yet. Manchester Road, as we all know, was developed basically as one of those corridors you just described. But by doing more of the math, the quantitative analysis, and looking at the buying power, which is based on, of course, income and land uses within the 5 communities, you can figure out how much square feet you need and probably how much square feet of various kinds of retailing that you'd expect. You can do a pretty good analysis of that. And it turns out you don't need that much land. While you might have back in the 70s, the 80s, as Manchester Road and those communities were growing, we've spread out that retail. And it's different now. Like you say, a lot of it's not done at place-based anymore as well. So we have a lot of underused land, like, used car lots instead of restaurants and clothing stores and hardware stores. So I was fascinated by his mapping of all that, by Paul, as well as the consulting team's mapping of that took that buying power and turned it into red corners and basically little downtowns or activity centers that could be created in our communities that would better reflect the amount of retail space that we need. The challenge then becomes, what do we do with the land that used to be called retail or commercial that's not suitable anymore? What does it become? And certainly property owners have a right to maximum value created off of that in light of, even within light of land use, local and state regulations. Well, I don't know what happens to all that. It could be more housing, which creates more buying power. Maybe more diverse housing, a little more dense, more village oriented kind of things where it's walkable, particularly for those of us who are, what I call myself, overcooked senior planners now instead of well-seasoned. But those are the kinds of, I think we got those challenges. I think that the problem isn't so much that we're taxing retail. That's fine. It's where it is. I mean, who gets the benefits of that? That's one issue. And certainly a place like St. Louis County has been wrestling that, but they're not alone wrestling with that. But we've got so much vacant property or underutilized property, parking lots that aren't being used like they used to be. And so our communities, even our suburban communities, start to look kind of lousy, except in a few places here and there. So if you had your druthers, you'd say, wow, this land use in my community here, Springfield, Illinois is one. It's just a bunch of Legos. Let's just reorganize the Legos. Well, you can do that on the map and you can do that in your 3D games, and we do, and we should, because we need to be thinking about those things. But it's harder to do in real life, particularly when there are property owners who think their property is worth more than it really is, until we can convince them that it really isn't and probably won't be, or those kinds of exercises. That's tough work for planners, and let alone elected officials. A great question. All right.
Hi, Bob. This is Jonathan Raish at the City of Kirkwood. Appreciate your presentation. And I was just curious on the slide that mentioned, basically prohibiting single-family zoning. And I know we've seen communities that have been doing that recently. And we're not there by any means in Kirkwood, but we have been pushing for increased residential density, especially in our downtown area, as a means to diversify the housing stock. But I'm curious on your insight. One thing in terms of, and we've been discussing it in terms of trying to provide diversity of housing and potentially affordable housing. However, in housing markets like Kirkwood's, the reality at the start at least is that, well, it's more likely that even if we have high density multifamily, it's probably still going to be not affordable, at least at the outset, right? So I'm curious if there is, short of local subsidies or anything like that, I assume it's still a conversation we're having, and we're having good dialogue at it at the local level. It's just sometimes hard. I'm interested in the insights of how to further that conversation by saying, basically, it doesn't dictate affordable housing when you allow higher density, but it doesn't prohibit it. Do you have insights on that?
I don't know that I really do. I think you've framed it well, Jonathan, and raised the question. The whole Minneapolis and Oregon experiment that needs to be followed very closely, and I know we as planners and the APA is really, keeping a very close eye on these things. I was particularly intrigued, especially after the killings in the many killings, really, of black men by white policemen, issues that came up, but even the APA came out and said, we're part of the problem. Finally saying it with a letter to the members or maybe to the world. That's part of many of the policies that we recommend, that we write, that we plans and regulations that we enforce are discriminatory in ways that probably are beyond what we should be doing. So I think that's where Minneapolis started. Now I don't know that in a deep way, and they're not requiring that every half acre, quarter acre, 1 acre lot in Minneapolis's residential neighborhoods, they all be subdivided even further. But apparently they've got people have the power to be able to do that to some degree. I don't know what that is. Put up a mother-in-law home or a tiny home in the back or alongside or whatever. Apparently it's not going to violate a whole lot, but could create more housing within the city. Now, and densify it. Broadly speaking, economists will say the more supply you can provide, the lower the price is going to be for everybody. Of course, to me, if you're going to create more housing, you're also going to create more demand for the materials that are make up housing, which is going to put some pressure on the economy in other parts like lumber or bricks and copper piping or whatever. But the more demand we've got going there, the economy will wake up. So in short, I'm sort of intrigued by Minneapolis. Are they doing it because they're good at their heart? They're tired of being accused of being discriminatory, particularly if people with disadvantaged minorities and certainly people of color. They can't afford a half acre lot, so they can't move here. But we didn't say that they're not allowed to move here. Or are they also concerned that they've kind of landlocked? And how do we increase population and buying power for all that retail stuff in Minneapolis while we compete with the suburbs or with St. Paul or maybe even with Chicago and St. Louis? So if by doing the policy, they kind of maybe help with more opportunities for more people, perhaps lowering rents and prices because of supply-demand situations, but also help to increase the potential to add population, diverse population perhaps, in Minneapolis. So I don't know if I got any answer. I think your Kirkwood example is great. Kirkwood made a huge step by redeveloping downtown, 25, 30 years ago. That was like a second attempt, but this one held. And more dense housing. But Kirkwood also had some of that going on around its edges, its downtown edges anyway. It's going to be affordable. One of the things I think we all need to be studying more, but certainly remembering too on that topic, is that just about every neighborhood that's been created in these United States was created by people who could afford to move there. And then they become lower income in neighborhoods as they sort of trickle down. It's the wrong words, but it's kind of that way. If you go to the north side of St. Louis, for example, yeah, it's poor people for the most part living up there. But if you looked at those houses, they're magnificent. They're huge. At one time, they cost a lot and had to be paid for by people who could afford them, who then moved on, passed away, migrated to the suburbs, and so forth. The challenge is, will we have more density because of this? Will people take advantage of that? I don't know. Are we going to solve some of our racial inequity problems because of that? I don't know. Is Kirkwood better off? Is it affordable? Does Kirkwood maybe have a problem with unaffordability that needs to be addressed a bit more fully, and with an elimination of single family zoning requirements help with that? Do you have a responsibility to the region and to people? I don't know. But I think we've entered a fascinating phase of discussion and policymaking.
I appreciate that, and thanks for your presentation.
You bet. Anything else?
So Bob, I've got a question for you.
I knew Carol would come through. All right.
I didn't want to disappoint you. Okay, so just thinking about all of that, nice suburban community, okay, and certainly we've had the discussion, we'll continue to have it about increasing our housing density because we have so much single family. So one of the questions that comes to mind when you were talking about allowing, breaking up some of our large lots and so on, is that if we did that theoretically, okay, we would then have to also be thinking about our street system and our water system, stormwater detention issues, which are also an issue here and all of that. You can't just increase density without thinking about, well, you've got an impact on the school system too, which has schools designed of a certain size, the street systems designed to carry so much traffic, the bus system, for instance, our water, our sewers. It's not a simple question.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with you, Carol. That's partly the Minneapolis and Oregon experience right now is maybe a sign that there's going to be full employment for planners for the next 4 decades. Because we got to wrestle with those kinds of impact questions and how we deal with them. So it's a fascinating topic. What's going to happen there? Because of some things we had to do at SLU this week, Sarah Coffin and I had to look up the job projections for urban planners that the federal government puts out. Every couple of years, they make projections for 10 years. And urban planners, we're going to, over the next decade, we're going to need 4,400 more net new urban planners and about 3,700 replacements over the next 10 years. So we're going to be creating more urban planners. One of the, we're kind of essential workers now. We will be growing the planning profession would grow as our occupation 3 times the rate of all national occupations. So we're in a good stead. We're leading an important cohort here. But one of the things we're going to have to wrestle with clearly is how quantitatively we figure out the challenges you just said. We've designed Olivet, Kirkwood, Springfield, Illinois, for that matter, for certain sizes and zoning and this, that, and other. And so the sewer system, the water systems, the street systems are basically built around that, one would assume. Pat Kelly, who's now heads up the Municipal League, mentioned to one of our students last year that at the municipal level, everything emanates from the comprehensive plan. We may have to really address these comprehensive plans if, in fact, we're going to do kind of what Minneapolis has been doing, or thinking about higher density housing, even maybe just even along the Olive Street corridor there in Olivet. Are the pipes big enough? Basically, the traffic flow is probably readily managed, but is there enough water? Is it going to the right places? Is there access? And that's one of your key points as well. If you put a house on the back of your property to house mom and dad, and then later on when your teenage sons, when they come back, nice, they're there, they're close by, but you got to run a water pipe to them and a sewer pipe out of them and all the electricity that goes to them. And do they really have access? Do they get their own driveway? And do we need to maybe make our alleys more drivable? Or, I don't know. These are all huge questions that get raised. When you increase density, you do increase the need for the infrastructure to support it as well. So it's not going to be easy. It may be the right answer, but getting from here to there is, like I said, not as easy as just moving the Legos around.
Bob, I would ask the question, so there has been much unfair treatment towards African Americans and other people, Asians and Hispanics and all that. and even to the extent of like voting, like African American women could not vote until 1960s, although the amendment was passed in the 20s for women's suffrage. So sometimes I think back to in 2011 and 10 when the schools in the city of St. Louis were not accredited, Riverview Gardens, Normandy, and then they gave the kids a choice of sending them out to better school districts, which took like, a bus, an hour bus ride there and back, which takes a lot of your time and the parents' time unfairly as well. It was almost a dare where we dare you to come out here and no one's going to do it, and they did that. But I always think back to it's not, a lot of times the approach is to try to densify or put more affordable housing in places like we mentioned, all of that, or Kirkwood, rather than to actually just give directly what people need. If the concern is, lead paint and pipes, and then instead of, a lot of times I just see like a program where it beats around the bush where, oh, well, if you want this, we will go out to left field, and then they'll trickle down, which seldomly gives you, what you're really intending it to do. But so just that narrative. But my thought is, how would St. Louis and many communities be different, the built environment be different, the taxing structures of schools, if there wasn't this intentional racial policies to saying, like everyone could have it, but for you. So in St. Louis, for example, we look at, North City, I mentioned, that was heavily redlined. If redlining never happened and people were allowed to actually just prosper, if we never had St. Louis University is my alma mater, but Mill Creek Valley is there. You had Greenwood, Archer, and Pine in Tulsa. If those things never happened, then, and the policies were actually pro-growth for all and not pro-growth for some, how would this talk be different? Or the talk might not happen at that point, but how would society be a little bit different as far as schools, wages, and all that?
Wow, why don't you ask the question of the millennium? Yeah, I don't know, but it sounds like you've defined a much better world, Jonathan. That there'd be less of that direct, indirect, overt, and covert discrimination for no reason other than skin color or fear of being Irish or Italian or African. We're sort of founded, we as the United States sort of founded on that kind of principle. At least the words are. Of course, we all knew that, first of all, it said all men were created equal. Well, we weren't really talking about people. And we certainly weren't talking about 3/5 of people, which were, that's what we considered slaves, were called 3/5. And they got those because the South wanted to look more populated, but not that much kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, I dream about that. That shouldn't be a problem. But as we all know, you probably more than most, but certainly we're all experiencing it as we speak, that there are gazillions of these kinds of policies, attitudes, even if we don't know we're not doing it, or that we're doing something that hurts others unintentionally and unfairly. It's happening. I mean, I was just taken aback by the conversations about single-family zoning. Who'd have thunk? That, oh yeah, well, no, it makes sense that we'd have comfortable, safe spaces with plenty of yard and this, that, and other, protect values, and everybody's got equal opportunity to it. It turns out, no, a lot of that started, or at least was used to discriminate. Well, people without money can't afford quarter-acre or even smaller lots for single-family homes. It's just not there. Okay, and then somebody said, well, they can afford apartments until they can afford the housing and so forth. Where are we? And those apartments end up concentrated. And then it's not hard to look at a lot of affordable housing policies that are going on, at least here we experience it in the St. Louis area, and I know in St. Louis County for sure. Where's all the tax credit housing? Wow, we created a system that enables developers to create and fund affordable housing, but it's not like we're putting it in Kirkwood or maybe not even in Olivet. It certainly is being concentrated where we think we want to put people who need affordable housing. Has anybody thought about that? Or is anybody suing to make those things change? Not enough. But you've asked the question. I think we probably need to center one of our APA SLU symposiums on that topic and get learning people to speak about it. Maybe it's a question to ask of next month's guest speaker as well. Where would we be? And we'd have problems. We would have problems in society. We always do. That's why planners exist, why people exist to solve problems. We can always be better. So there's always a challenge. It would be just nice to be well beyond these particular challenges and moving on to something greater for the good of the whole. Keep asking though. Thank you. Answer though, I would go back into consulting, tell everybody it's going to cost you this much, and I'd be really rich.
No, that's wonderful. And do we have any other questions at this time?
I guess I could follow that up real quick, Jonathan. That kind of question is what we should, as a planning profession, be asking ourselves all the time. I mean, given the ethics of the AICP, given probably where most of our hearts and minds are anyway, Carol's point about, what are the unintended consequences? Really important. Yeah, great idea. But how do we get from here to there? Because there's going to be things that happen. This is what planners should love to do. It drives you crazy sometimes, and you got to take a break. But if you're going to improve things, what are we unimproving and what are we changing that can be expensive, can be politically charged, and maybe even cause some very bad things to happen. We're in one of those periods right now, I think, in America, where we're kind of going through that process, and lots of people. I mean, I'm encouraged by the numbers of people who are rethinking some of these policies, some of these programs, some of these attitudes, some of the budgetary priorities, in the public level. Well, sometimes it takes a crisis to make these things happen. But sometimes it takes a few people to die too, but I don't want to be in charge of that. All righty.
Well, I will thank you. If everyone can thank Bob Lewis with their silent claps that we cannot hear because you guys are all on mute. And no, thank you.
Don's cookie. All right.
Oh yeah, Don the baker. That's after you retire, man. That's what you're doing, I see. So I'm going to take it back to just finishing up the announcements. Thank you, Bob. Again, that's 1 CM credit for 1 ethics CM credit for the September luncheon. This presentation was recorded, so if you know someone who missed it, then they can always they'll find it online soon at our section's website, APMO. Again, we have October the luncheon. We have Colin Gordon. That's going to be on October 21st. We're very excited to have him. We have the UMSL Chancellor Certificate. That's going to start about 2 or 3 weeks from now. So there's a little space available. So if you know people who are interested in the planning and zoning side, you're not really formally trained in planning, then it's more of like a citizen's guide to that. We want to thank our sponsors for this luncheon, CMT. We heard from Scott and Amy with RDG on their planning activities. So please reach out if you want extra planning help. We also have our APA sponsors that we rely to bring different programs to you, especially we just love their support and we love supporting them as well. the Missouri State Planning Conference, which happens next week, October 7th and 8th. If you're going in person, there's a number of mobile workshops, but also in-person sessions, and they have a live on-demand session. I noted some of the people. So Bob Lewis will be presenting. So will Sean Tooley, Steve Eifendal, Beth, Colleen, Tim, Alana, Gary, and Amy, all from the St. Louis section, and I will be presenting as well there. And finally, a few other announcements. You can always find these in the weekly e-blast that we have. But I'd like to also, for the weekly e-blast, thank Christy Volker, John Cruz, and Nate Silverstein on what they do for the communications for the section. But we have the sales. They're looking for young ambassadors to volunteer and join their team. So you could learn more from Elizabeth Gerard at elizabeth.gerard@usbank.com. Also the St. Louis Prop NS program, which seeks to stabilize a lot of vacant properties. There's a lot of eligibility for the properties, so please either look at the City of St. Louis website or also to our weekly e-blast. And with that, I thank you guys all for joining us today, and we look forward to either seeing you at the Missouri State Planning Conference or at the next Luncheon with County Board. Thank you very much.